Are these not amazing textures? I will show you how easy this is in this video. And then we will get started right away. First, we need to prepare the filler mixture. For that, we weigh out 200 grams of marble powder. I am actually using a scale here so that you can see it. Later on, once you have worked with marble powder a bit more, you will get the hang of it. Like Grandma used to say when cooking, you will just see it. But for now, in the beginning, we want to be very precise. To the 200 grams of marble powder, we then add 180 grams of binder. This means you need significantly less binder than marble powder. These are weight measurements, so you really have to use a scale. This is not about volume or liters. What matters is the weight. Then the whole mixture needs to be stirred well. At first, it might feel a bit stiff, and it may seem like the ratio is not quite right. But once you mix it thoroughly, you will notice it eventually starts to fit. The paste is ready when it makes a squelching sound. You will hear it later when you no longer measure, but just mix the materials together. Then you will know, now the consistency is just right. When it comes to applying the filler paste, I use a palette knife, not a spatula, but a palette knife. And I use the back side. I take the paste, the filler, with the back of the palette knife because that way I can spread it directly onto the canvas. I recommend that for your first projects, you start by priming the entire canvas thinly with marble powder. Of course, you can also apply marble powder only to certain parts of the canvas later on. That also works well. But it is always a bit trickier when you have singular areas, just a bit of marble powder and the rest is plain canvas. Later, when painting, it becomes harder to blend those transitions. That is why I advise you to initially work in this full surface manner. Apply it thinly all over. It is also fun to apply, you will notice. The material is not critical, it does not dry instantly. So you can easily move the material around on the canvas for about 45 minutes and even start over if you do not like how it looks. This is ideal especially for beginners who are trying out filler pastes for the first time. And once everything is primed, you simply place a few thicker spots onto the canvas. It does not need to be smoothly spread, that would actually be counterproductive. But do not create any patterns. The pattern will come from the material itself. The marble powder cracks and beautiful fractures will form. If you create patterns beforehand, it becomes a bit counterproductive. Marble powder forms its own natural breaks. If you have added your own designs, they will clash. Let the material do the work on its own. During the drying process, beautiful textures will automatically emerge. Once your piece is finished, it simply needs to dry. Place it somewhere dry, a heater is helpful. Please do not use a hair dryer, that does not really help. Let it dry for 2 days, ideally with some airflow from underneath, prop it up a little. That way it will naturally develop excellent cracks. 2 days later, you will have the most beautiful cracks. Some will be larger, those are the thicker areas. Others will have smaller cracks, those are the thinner spots. But when you now touch your artwork, you will notice there are still some rough spots, especially around the edges. It is not a bad idea to go over those areas with some sandpaper. A few clumps will come loose, do not worry about that. It is actually good if something that was not well attached comes off now, rather than later when you are painting, or worse, it ends up in your brush. So whatever falls off now is totally fine. You will notice I am picking at it a bit. Something is coming loose. That is okay. It happens. And if later on, with thicker pieces, large chunks do fall off, you can easily glue them back with acrylic binder. Right now, probably nothing big will fall off, just a bit of dust and what you have sanded off. Now we move on to the first color application. You can see I have a lot of white, then a bit of yellow, and a bit of dark brown. You can absolutely use different colors, but make sure to use a large amount of white or a light cream. This is what we need for the base layer. The water at this point is only used to slightly moisten the brush. You will notice I do not really work with water. I take the paint directly from the plate. I like using porcelain plates, they are super easy to clean. I start right in the center because after drying, a nice open area appeared there on my canvas, and I imagine that part will remain a bit brighter. So that is where I start, priming it all with white. That does not mean the whole painting will stay white, but white as a base is easier to darken later than if you start with a very dark color. If you want it lighter, you will need tons of white. You will see that in a moment when I first add a bit of color. What is important in this step is that you really try to get into all the grooves. Now comes the first touch of color. You will notice just a tiny bit of yellow, and it already shimmers in yellow tones. This shows you color quickly stands out against white, which is why you should always start by priming with white, then add the color gradually and slowly. That way, it is easier to control the outcome. Now the base layer is done. I have not added any major highlights, just a simple base coat. Some spots are brighter, others a bit darker. I go over everything again with the brush, blend a bit more. And now it is very important that you also think of the edges. They should be painted right away too. That gives you the option to hang the piece without a frame directly on the wall. It keeps things affordable and can still look very beautiful. But you should keep this in mind for every layer, paint the edges too, so you do not have to go back later and try to recreate the same shades. If you paint the edges with each layer, they will end up looking just like the rest of the painting. This is what your work looks like when it is dried. Now comes the next color layer, and this time we take a very different approach. Now comes a dark color, in my case it is brown, which I heavily dilute. You see, I have a bit of brown on the plate, and I now dilute part of it on the porcelain plate. And with this liquid paint, we coat the entire piece. You want to make sure this dark color runs into the cracks that formed in the marble powder. That will make the cracks much more visible. You can already see it as you watch. The texture becomes much more pronounced than if you only applied color on the surface. Once everything is covered with this paint, we use the spray bottle. That pushes the dark color further into the cracks, and at the same time it reveals the lighter areas, the higher points, again just a bit. Then you can dab at it a bit, too, to adjust the darkness or brightness. This is how you play with the structure of the marble powder until you like it, until you have added just the right highlights. Then everything needs to dry. It will take about half a day. I go over it again here and add a few accents where I want some areas to appear even darker. You can really play with this. It is so fluid, this application. It does not dry immediately. So you can always add more or remove some until the piece looks the way you want it. This is what that layer looks like once dried. And now we move on to the next layer. We add a bit more color, and this time I use a roller. The roller is slightly damp. And now this is very important. Do not use too much paint. We do not want to smother the surface. We just want to highlight the raised areas. So I test it first on a piece of newspaper to see how much paint is on the roller, remove the excess, and get a feel for the paint. Then I can start and highlight a few areas. I begin at the edge. You can already see the orange tint appearing. I apply this with a very light touch. I am not rolling it like you would on a wall. I just want the raised parts to grab the paint from the roller. And for the final color step, I take dark brown acrylic paint, spread it out a bit so that it becomes very dry, not mushy, but almost powdery to the touch. I really like working with my hands. And now I go over the center again, bring out a bit more of those raised parts, and add one more layer of emphasis, making the center a bit more exciting. Once that final layer has dried, we apply acrylic varnish to the piece. I always recommend sealing your paintings with varnish. It does not have to be glossy. This one is only a satin gloss. You can also go with matte, whatever suits your taste. But I do recommend varnish because it really brings out the brilliance of the colors. Plus, the painting is better protected, especially since it has some texture and the cracks are clearly there. Over time, some dust can settle in those cracks. If it is varnished, it is much easier to wipe clean with a damp cloth. I try to get a lot of varnish into the recesses, so the application is a bit heavier. But it will not stay like that. I will go over it again later and remove the excess. And of course, I also varnish the edges, so the entire piece has a unified appearance. Then your artwork needs to dry one last time, and your first project using marble powder is complete.